All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig in a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video. Is Brandon Aiyuk going or not? That is really the big subplot surrounding the 49ers 2024 NFL Draft. Star wide receiver Brandon Aiyuk. Is he going to be here? Is he not going to be here? We'll talk about the latest coming up next. First, we're brought to you by Pig in a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig in a Pickle, the best barbecue you're going to find. Go get the brisket chili, the pulled pork, the barbecue chicken. It's all amazing. Go say hi to Damon and Mary and tell them that Larry Krueger sent you. All right, let's talk a little bit about the big story of the 49ers spring. Last year, it was Trey Lance or Brock Purdy or Trey Lance or Sam Darnold, Darnold or Lance or Purdy or Lance or Darnold or Purdy or Lance. And last year, that was the big subplot. And it drove people crazy. And eventually people were like, oh, enough already. I can't believe this is going on. And I can't tell you the number of people that told me, Krug, they're not trading Trey Lance. Will you drop it? Blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? They did trade Trey Lance, and they shopped him during the draft. And I told you about it last February. And I know people got tired of hearing it, but I was on that one. And I think I'm on this one too. And it's whether or not Brandon Aiyuk is going to get dealt. And I'm starting to think that the tea leaves are saying he is going to get dealt. Now, why? Well, first of all, they've got a ridiculous cap situation where they're going to have to pay their quarterback $50 million. They've also invested a ton of money in wide receivers. They've already invested that money in Debo and Juwan Jennings. So it's not about who's better. It's about who they've already invested in and who they can move. You know, was DeForest Buckner better than Eric Armstead? Yeah, but they couldn't move Eric Armstead for anything, but they could move DeForest Buckner for a first, and thus they did. And here they are again with a similar type situation where they have a wide receiver in Debo that I'm sure they'd love to move, but they can't move him, and a wide receiver in Aiyuk who's got trade value, and he's probably the guy they should pay, but he's the guy that they potentially can move. And I think ultimately they're going to. There was a quote from Brock Purdy talking about Aiyuk the other day at a youth football camp, and it sounded like he was almost saying goodbye to Aiyuk, saying, you know, I'll always appreciate what Brandon did for me and blah, blah, blah. It just sounded very much like Aiyuk was moving on. And then today, our good friend Chase Sr. From Chat Sports says that while the Niners are saying they're not shopping Aiyuk, which is the right thing to say, and that came out yesterday, reports out of Pittsburgh indicate the Steelers are really, really eager to trade for Brandon Aiyuk. And there's a indication, or a publication, I should say, in Pittsburgh that is making it seem like it would be surprising if the Steelers did not trade for Brandon Aiyuk. So it's interesting, that's for sure. It's a report out of Pittsburgh from All Steelers. And I don't know if All Steelers, how credible a source is, that source is, but they would be surprised if there is not an Aiyuk trade. You know, so I don't know for sure if it's accurate, if it's not accurate, but it's definitely out there that the Steelers want Brandon Aiyuk, are pursuing Brandon Aiyuk still. And according to one source, All Steelers, it would be a surprise if the Steelers did not land Brandon Aiyuk. All right. So that would give the 49ers, if the Steelers were trading their first round pick, the 20th pick in the first round. They would have 20 and 31. What could they do at 20? Who could they get at 20? Well, in the mock draft that I'm looking at, 20 on down goes Amarius Mims, Georgia offensive tackle, Byron Murphy, University of Texas defensive tackle, Tyler Guyton, Oklahoma offensive tackle, J.C. Latham, Alabama offensive tackle, Jackson Powers Johnson, Oregon center, Cooper DeJean, the cornerback / safety from Iowa, who's a hell of a player in his own right. And then you're getting into Chop Robinson, Adonai Mitchell, the wide receiver, Brian Thomas. So the question is, would the Niners make that trade? And I think they would. I think they would, because I think they're strapped for the cap, and then the question is, who would they take? Who would they take at 20? Would they replace Brandon Aiyuk with Brian Thomas? Brian Thomas is a big time receiver. There's no question about it. He had 17 touchdowns this year. He's a big playmaker. You could take out Aiyuk and plug in Brian Thomas, and maybe in year one you wouldn't be doing as well, but probably in a couple of years you'd be doing pretty damn well. So there's that angle. Then there's always the chance for the offensive lineman. Do you go with one of those premier offensive linemen, maybe Tyler Guyton, who played at Oklahoma and played right tackle and might be a plug and play right tackle, maybe J.C. Latham. To me, it would be a choice based on this mock draft that I'm looking at, a choice between J.C. Latham, who's just a monster offensive tackle, 350 pounds, 6'6". He's just an absolute behemoth, power mover in the run game. He is a monster. He is an absolute monster, and you could plug him in at right tackle, and he'd probably be your starting right tackle for the next 10 years. It's a decision between him, Cooper DeJean, who could be an impact player at corner or at safety or at slot corner. Great athlete, big time player, coming off an injury, but he tested well in his workout. He had his pro day on April the 8th, and he was incredible. He's a young player. He just turned 21 in February. He's coming off a season where he gave up a passer rating of 37.8 when targeted. To me, it's Cooper DeJean, it's J.C. Latham, or it's the wide receiver, Brian Thomas Jr., who's an amazing player that lots of teams in the NFL love. So he scored 17 touchdowns this year. He's 6'4". He's got great speed. So those are your picks. And to me, as much as I love Aiyuk, as severe as the Niner cap problem is, with what they're going to have to pay Brock Purdy, it probably makes sense. So it's interesting. The 49ers, of course, do not want to be on the record as saying we're shopping our guy, because what if the trade falls through? Then you've got an unhappy player that you shopped. That's not good. You've now, you look like you failed because you tried and failed to trade him. So that's not a good thing. So you don't want to be on the record, and then you're devaluing your asset because here's now a player that you're trying to trade. As soon as the word gets out that you're trying to trade the player, now his value's less. So you don't want to be in the mode of, hey, we're trying to trade Brandon Aiyuk. You want to be in the mode of, we're listening. We've got options on our cap. We can make other moves to make cap room, and we're listening. The reality is, though, you're paying your quarterback 50 times next year. He's probably going to get record money from what I'm hearing. And you're going to pay him huge money next year. And so that means significant players are going to have to come off the books. Now, you could wait a year and try to figure it out all next year. But what you're going to get for Deebo Samuel coming off of next year is nothing compared to what you potentially could get right now for Brandon Aiyuk. So maybe the Niners want to stay ahead of the game and move Aiyuk for a first-round pick. And if the Steelers are really desperate, who knows? Maybe they would be offering more than the 20th pick. Maybe it's a first-round pick and a day 3 pick. We really don't know. But it is interesting that Chase Sr. says that the word out of Pittsburgh is that there are Steeler sources that believe that it would be shocking if the Steelers didn't trade for Brandon Aiyuk at this point. And to me, that's more credible than the report saying, yeah, the 49ers are not shopping him. Yeah, the 49ers are not shopping him because the 49ers do not want to shop him, but doesn't mean they're not listening. And I got to think that if Brandon Aiyuk really is going to wait till the end of the wide receiver, free agent period and wait for the Justin Jeffersons of the world to reset the market, that he wants big, big money. And they probably don't have him budgeted for that kind of money. So this is a very interesting scenario. And as we get closer to the draft next Thursday, this is the elephant in the corner of the room. will the Niners trade Brandon Aiyuk? And if you believe Chase Sr. and the reports out of Pittsburgh, the Steelers feel like they're going to be able to make a deal for Aiyuk. So then the question is, what if you're the Niners, what do you do with the 20th pick? If it comes down to Cooper DeJean, J.C. Latham, and Brian Thomas, do you go with Brian Thomas and have Thomas and Aiyuk compared forever? Do you go with Latham and plug him in right at right tackle? I think I would probably go that route with Latham, and maybe even go double offensive line. Maybe go J.C. Latham at 20 and Zach Frazier at 31, or maybe you go J.C. Latham at 20 and you go with Xavier Legette or Malachi Corley at 31. But the Niners have to get serious about their offensive line. They have Brock Purdy. He's their franchise quarterback. It's time to build a fortress around him and help him. How do you help him? You help him if you get him a great receiver. Well, Brian Thomas is a great receiver. You help him if you get him a great offensive line. Well, guess what? Zach Frazier and J.C. Latham are great offensive linemen, in my opinion. So very interesting time for the Niners. And it just goes to show that, they're saying one thing: we're not shopping him. We're telling other teams we're not shopping him. Okay, you're not shopping him, but it doesn't mean that other teams don't desire him and aren't coming after him, and it doesn't mean that they won't ultimately trade him. I think it's going to be kind of like a Trey Lance thing. They weren't shopping Trey Lance until they were. They said they weren't shopping Trey Lance at the draft, but they did. They said they weren't shopping Trey Lance this summer, but eventually they did, and they moved him for a 4th-round pick. So they obviously were shopping him. I think they want the world to know that they're not shopping Aiyuk, but I think they're actually shopping Aiyuk. All right, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of The Krug Show, and thanks to all of you guys for supporting The Krug Show on YouTube.